Hey everyone, it's John Heath here again for Milton Rose Learning with another Let's Learn video on Romeo and Juliet characters. Okay, so we're going to have a really good rundown of most of the characters in the play today. So we're going to look at a who's who, just to give you a very quick thumbnail sketch of each character that you need to worry about. Then we're going to look at how characters' interpretations change over time, because the Elizabethans were very different to you and I. So we'll look at how the Elizabethans would see the characters, and then how a more modern audience would interpret that. That's for the real high grades. And then we'll look at key characterization of Romeo and Juliet and how they change over time, because obviously they have turning points in the narrative, and we'll tease those out for you as well, which will again really help you revise and get ready for exams and for essays at school. Okay then, let's dive in. So first up, we'll do what we would call a quick who's who. So let's just get a quick grab on the main characters if you haven't studied the play before, or if you just want to revise. Okay, so first off, let's start with the big man. Let's start with Romeo. So Romeo then, obviously very passionate and impulsive young man. He falls deeply in love with a lovely lady called Juliet. He's driven by intense emotion, and that's his hamartia, that's his tragic kind of tragic quality, which causes his downfall. He's just too passionate, basically, and his actions lead to tragic consequences. He just needs to calm down, basically. He gets too emotional, and that's his problem. Then we have Juliet. So Juliet then is an intelligent young woman, very independent, but she's bound by her family's expectations. They want her to marry Paris, which we'll see in a second, but she defies her family to pursue the love with Romeo, and it even comes at great personal cost. Obviously tragedy ensues there, so she's a very, very tragic figure in that sense. Mercutio, one of my favourite characters in all of Shakespeare. So Mercutio is Romeo's witty and hot-headed friend, loyal but quick to anger. So his death sets off the tragic chain of events in the play. Okay, so he's very witty, very kind of very clever with his witticisms, but ultimately he does wind up dead, and he is too kind of hot-headed. He plays into Elizabethan stereotypes of Italians being these kind of hot-headed kind of people. Okay, next one, Tybalt. So Tybalt is Juliet's cousin, fiercely loyal to the Capulet name, and his aggression and desire to uphold family honour lead to his downfall as well. Okay, there is there's a lot of death in this play, and obviously love and death and tragedy kind of intertwined together, and that's kind of encapsulated in Tybalt's character. Then we have the character of Friar Laurence, who's basically a bit like a monk or a religious figure. So he is a wise and well-meaning priest who secretly marries Romeo and Juliet, and by doing that kind of seals their fate. He hopes to end the feud between the families through the union of the lovers. So he's very idealistic, which is lovely. But again, being a friar, being a Catholic kind of priest, effectively, he plays into the stereotypes which the Elizabethans had of Italian Catholics being potentially well-meaning but misguided and not really doing the right thing most of the time. And Friar Laurence kind of explores that as a character. Then we have the nurse. So the nurse is Juliet's kind of loyal and caring, kind of almost maternal-like figure. She supports Juliet's love for Romeo, but eventually advises her to marry Paris, the political marriage to Paris, but it wouldn't be the romantic love because she doesn't love him. So the nurse, in some ways, is kind of upholding the Elizabethan kind of marital norms, or matrimonial norms, you might say. Lord Capulet, a bit of a murky figure in some ways. So Lord Capulet is Juliet's father. Initially he's very kind and protective, but later he does become forceful and controlling, so he becomes a bit of an agent of patriarchy, which is like male domination. He pressures Juliet into marrying Paris because that's his preferred match, unaware though of the secret marriage to Romeo. Okay, so very, very important, and not all bad, I think, with Lord Capulet, but he does have two sides to him which you want to tease out at school. Okay, Benvolio. Last but not least on the characters, Romeo's thoughtful and peace-loving cousin, often trying to prevent the violence. Good luck with that. He acts as a mediator in the family feud, attempts to keep the peace between the Montagues and the Capulets, but it's a thankless task. I mean, it's a very, very difficult one to keep the peace between those two. And those are in my mind, the kind of majority of the bless me. The main characters that you need to worry about. Okay, so I think generally not quite straightforward in that sense. However, for the high grades, what you want to do is you want to be looking at characters. The interpretations of characters do change over time. Okay, and I think that's very, very important. So the Elizabethan audience interpret the characters in one way, and then a modern audience like you and I would interpret them in very different ways because our society has evolved and we have different values now. So in an essay you want to tease out sometimes the Elizabethan audience response and then a modern audience response, and this table should help. So first off, let's look at Romeo. Okay, we'll just try and get it all squared up there. Okay, so with Romeo then, you can see it on the left is Elizabethan audience. So they would have seen him as noble, very passionate young man, and he's following the ideals of courtly romance. His quick shift, though, from Rosaline to Juliet might be viewed as impulsive, but still very romantic. It was seen as a kind of a good thing in some ways. But if we look at the modern day audience, they would see him now, because we've had psychoanalysis and Sigmund Freud and things like that, we would see him as immature and emotionally unstable. His rapid mood swings and his obsession with love are less heroic and more reckless. It's like we go, whoa, you want to calm him down, because we're much calmer as a kind of race now, and we understand psychology much, much better than the Elizabethans. Then we have, just down here, we have Juliet. So Juliet is praised for her loyalty for the Elizabethans on the left, obedience at first as well, and later for her courage. Young, she was 13, 14 roughly, and people always get a bit kind of weirded out by that. But remember, people did die a lot earlier in Elizabethan England. They might die at 35, 40. So things happened a lot earlier in life. A modern day interpretation of Juliet, though, would see her as brave and intelligent, but her age raises concerns because obviously we don't get married that early. And, the age thing, a lot of my students do get a bit funny about it. They're a bit uncomfortable about marrying at 13, 14, but it's kind of social values and things change. The audience may question in a modern day how much agency she truly has. And remember, agency is a great word. It means your freedom of action. So with all of our democracy and human rights and things like that, we might question now Juliet kind of being forced into marriage and not having much agency. Next one is Mercutio. You can see that one. So on the left, Elizabethans would see him as witty and bold. He's a crowd favourite. Everyone loves Mercutio. His wordplay, cynicism, delights audience. He's in the Elizabethan era, and his death was seen as a serious turning point. However, in the modern day period, not much has changed in some ways. He's still a favourite. Everyone loves Mercutio. His humour and depth make him very relatable. But he's seen as a tragic character because obviously his death triggers off all the kind of tragic elements. So a more modern day interpretation might focus slightly more on that. Tybalt. On the left, we have the Elizabethan view. So honour-driven, his aggression would be understood in the context of family duty and masculine pride. He's a man's man. He's being very tough, and the Elizabethans would have resonated with that. But on the right, a lot has changed now with our notions of masculinity. So he might be seen as a toxic, kind of violent figure, a bit like, toxic masculinity. And kind of see him as a very destructive element who kind of needs to be managed effectively. Friar Laurence on the left, Elizabethan, they would have saw him as a trusted spiritual figure trying to do good, but they weren't that keen on Catholics, so they would have been a little bit suspicious. His plan would have been viewed as wise, but quite risky. And then on the right for Friar Laurence, a modern day interpretation, They would have criticised him for the poor judgment and meddling in their affairs. Romeo and Juliet should be allowed to prosecute their own relationship. And they would have maybe questioned his ethics and logic. We're a little bit more suspicious now these days of people's motivations, shall we say. The nurse, just down here, we have on the left the Elizabethans might have picked up on her comic relief and saw her as a maternal figure. She is quite witty and she's very loyal to Juliet. But on the right, modern day audience would have seen her as funny, but also potentially irresponsible and unreliable because she keeps shilly-shallying with her advice. And her sudden change of loyalty would probably be criticised. We'd see her as like flip-flopping now and not actually being kind of reliable as a figure. And then Lord Capulet at the bottom. An Elizabethan audience would have seen he's a responsible patriarchal figure. He's protecting the family honour. And his control over Juliet would not have been a problem. They'd have just said, yeah, that's what you do with your daughter. But obviously on the right-hand side, a modern-day audience, values have changed now. So Capulet would be seen as overbearing, maybe even emotionally abusive. His treatment of Juliet may provoke sympathy for her and criticism of him. So you can see very, very much the two audiences, the Elizabethans and the modern audience, would see them in very, very different ways. And if you want the top grades, try and tease out some of those differences where it's relevant in your essays. Okay, right then. Last one. Let's look at key characterization. So characters change, don't they? They go on a journey in texts, especially in Romeo and Juliet. So let's look at the start of the text. Romeo and Juliet meet in Act 1, Scene 5. They fall in love instantly at the Capulet party, but they're unaware of each other's kind of identity. So the characterization at the start of their relationship is shown as impulsive, romantic, and very, very idealistic. They're driven by their emotions. They don't think with their heads, they think with their hearts. Okay, and that's part of the problem. Good quotation for that is, "Did my heart love till now? Forswear it, sight, for I never saw true beauty till this night." Running away with each other. But it's very romantic, I must say. It's absolutely beautiful writing. But you do have, it's foreshadowing, isn't it? And a clever reader or a clever person in the audience would know this isn't going to end well. Let's put it that way. And then a real turning point in the characterization is here, in my mind. So Juliet refuses to marry Paris in Act 3, Scene 5. So Juliet defies her parents and rejects a second arranged marriage, staying loyal to Romeo. So very, very kind of transgression of patriarchy there. So in the characterization, she's shown as brave, determined and independent, extremely mature in terms of her emotions, especially from a modern day interpretation. A really good quote for that is, "He shall not make me there a joyful bride." Okay, basically, I don't want to marry Paris. I want my own agency. I want my own freedoms to do what I choose, effectively. So a really big turning point there. And then at the end of the text, and it is a tragic end, isn't it? We have the tomb scene, Act 5, Scene 3. So here we have, believing Juliet is dead, Romeo kills himself, Juliet wakes and takes her own life. So both lovers are shown as tragically loyal and emotionally driven, but they're victims of fate, secrecy and haste. They act in haste. They don't reflect on things. It's such a tragedy. Good quotation. "Here's to my love." Drinks the potion. "O true apothecary, thy drugs are quick. Thus with a kiss I die." Okay, it's so tragic, isn't it? So awful, really, when you think about it. But you can see, can't you? They do go on an emotional journey, and that turning point of refusing to marry Paris, kind of one of the reasons why it seals their fate. Okay. Now, hopefully you've enjoyed that whistle-stop tour through the characters of Romeo and Juliet. I kind of really enjoyed that one. Don't forget to hit, obviously, the like, subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss another Let's Learn video again. We'll be making videos quite rapidly now, I think. So keep an eye on that, and please do share it with all your friends. If you have any interesting comments or experiences from school of Romeo and Juliet, please do chuck them in the comments and we'll always do our best to reply. And it just remains to say, obviously, thanks for listening. Hopefully you've had some fun, and we'll see you soon. Take care.